Progressive pulmonary fibrosis leads initially to dyspnea on exertion, limiting the activities that patients can perform, including activities of daily living. And as it progresses to more advanced stages, it can even cause um, dyspnea at rest and requiring home oxygen, which is again limiting activities of daily living and tremendously impacting patients' quality of life. Sure. I think I would like to step back and say that some of these patients are seen by physicians, including rheumatologists, and actually go undiagnosed. These patients don't even know that they have ILD. For example, patients with rheumatoid arthritis who are seen primarily for a joint involvement might go undiagnosed, and the ILD diagnosis might be missed for many years. So it's actually really important that you're screened first for presence of ILD, and then the next step is that you're monitored for progression of ILD, and that includes obviously asking about symptoms, but also obtaining serial FVCs, and if necessary, also repeating the high-resolution chest CT that was used for the screening. And that also requires a close collaboration between, for example, a rheumatologist and a pulmonologist. So multidisciplinary care is key to capture disease progression. The reason why this is really important is that if the disease progresses and we don't intervene, that can lead to irreversible damage. And once the alveolar spaces are fibrosed, it's very difficult to regress to that fibrosis to a lower level. So it's the key is to prevent fibrosis. The recent approval of Nerandomilast expands our armamentarium for treating patients with progressive pulmonary fibrosis. Until now, there is only one medication that is FDA approved for progressive pulmonary fibrosis, which is nintedanib. Um, and nerandomilast is the second medication that has been approved for that indication. Um, Also, immunosuppressive agents are used for treating ILDs in certain settings, such as autoimmune ILDs. But until now, if those medications were not sufficient to control patients' underlying ILD, um, we didn't have any other options. And nerandomilast expands that armamentarium. And we will talk later about the trial results, but I think it's an excellent addition to our therapeutic options. This trial had three arms. One arm was placebo, and the other arm was nerandomilast at a dose of 9 milligram BID. And the third arm was nerandomilast at a dose of 18 milligram BID. And what is so special about the study results is that both dosages met its primary outcome, which was the slowing of the decline in forced vital capacity. And what is also so important to keep in mind, progressive pulmonary fibrosis is not just one diagnosis. There are multiple underlying diagnoses that have led to this similar downstream picture, which is basically pulmonary fibrosis. What was so special here is that the results are consistent across all these diagnoses, be it autoimmune progressive pulmonary fibrosis or, for example, hypersensitivity pneumonitis. Um, and in addition to the benefit in regard to the lung volume, nerandomilast at both dosages showed a survival benefit during the study period, which is a very special finding because that has never been seen in any other ILD trials, that a medication during the study period shows a survival benefit, which brings up the point that nerandomilast might have additional beneficial impact beyond what we have seen on the lung volume. That remains to be further studied. And what is also important to point out that in addition to consistent results across the diagnosis, the results were also consistent whether background nintedanib was used or not. In this trial, around 44% of patients were on background nintedanib, and regardless whether the patients were on nintedanib or not on nintedanib, basically nerandomilast monotherapy, results were consistent, which is very reassuring. Basically, it tells us this medication can be given alone or in combination with nintedanib. Based on the current results, the treatment effect is consistent across the different diagnoses, including the SARD ILDs, which was around 1/4 of the study population. I think patients who are at risk for progression, for further progression, are the patients that would tremendously benefit from this medication, because this medication um, enables us to prevent further damage. In terms of biomarkers, for example, that needs to be seen because we have not run yet the biomarker data in this trial to see whether there's a subgroup with a certain biomarker that would benefit more from this medication. Any biomarker that puts the patient at risk of progression most probably is a good indicator that this medication would be beneficial. I think what is also so encouraging about the study results is that when you look at the side effect profile and tolerability of nerandomilast, they're both favorable and often very similar between the placebo group and the treatment groups. Um, the most common side effect is diarrhea, but if you look at the monotherapy group, the subgroup that was not on nintedanib, just was on nerandomilast, the rate of diarrhea in the 9 milligram BID dose is exactly the same like the rate of diarrhea in the placebo arm, which is very reassuring. Also, when you look at the higher dose, which is the 18 milligram BID dose, the rate of diarrhea is only 12% higher in the nerandomilast monotherapy group compared to placebo, which is substantially better than what we have seen with nintedanib, which tells me this medication most probably has less GI side effects than nintedanib, which is tremendously important for the patients, because ultimately we want to improve patients' quality of life and survival. Um, this medication shows a survival benefit, but also the side effect profile is in a way that I don't think the side effect profile will tremendously impact in a negative way patients' quality of life. Also, when we look at other class effects of PD4 inhibitors, such as depression, suicidality, this was not observed here. So basically, the rate of depression or suicidality was similar and balanced between the placebo arm and the treatment arms. More importantly, PDE4 inhibitors most probably have also an immunomodulatory effect beyond what we have seen in terms of antifibrotic effect. Um, but this medication doesn't seem to immunosuppress patients to that extent that they, for example, would have higher rate of respiratory infections. This was not observed here, which is again very encouraging because our patients have already a pre-damaged lung. And when they have a pre-damaged lung, they are more prone to have adverse outcomes when they have a lung infection. Um, and and we don't want to use a medication that puts them at higher risk for having, for example, pneumonias um, in this setting. Um, and this medication has very, very favorable side effects in that regard. I think this medication, along with other approved medications that have uh, been um, added to our armamentarium recently, will increase, first of all, the awareness of ILD. Because the first step is to screen for ILD, which requires a high resolution chest CT, and a chest x ray is not sufficient in that case. Um, and then, more importantly, it will increase our awareness of the need for monitoring, be it serially obtained pulmonary function tests, or also asking patients about symptoms. Um, and and obviously, because our armamentarium is expanded, also we're going to have a lower threshold for initiating treatment. Um, Also, it's important to point out that we do not want for the patients to develop symptoms before we intervene, because often patients have then lost substantial portion of their lung volume before they develop symptoms. It's important to monitor and intervene before the patients have developed symptoms, because often the lung damage is irreversible. I think it's important to point out that the FIBRONEER trials in general, FIBRONEER-ILD trial, is going after the concept that a scar is a scar regardless of the divergent upstream diagnosis. Basically, once we have lung fibrosis, if you have an effective treatment, in this case, a preferential PDE4B inhibitor, um, that effective treatment will treat lung fibrosis regardless of what the upstream diagnosis was. Um, and it brings basically different fields together. It brings rheumatology and pulmonary medicine together, um, and helps us um, understand these diseases from a different perspective, but also encourages us to work together. So it's multidisciplinary care, which will ultimately benefit our patients in terms of longer survival and better quality of life.